Okay, so hello and welcome to everyone who has joined us today, particularly in your lunch hour. This is the first of BIM Webinar 1.0, part of the webinar series BIM 2016, Are You Really Ready? My name is Andy Bourne, Director of Charlton Recruitment and BIM Recruitment Specialist. I've devised this webinar series really to give practical and usable advice and training to the industry in readiness for the Level 2 BIM government target, which is everyone knows is coming out in 2016. It's really an attempt to sort of demystify the regulations, help companies, give some real practical advice to people to be ready and also benefit from them. Guest speaker today who really doesn't hardly need any introducing, who, due to his standing in the industry, Mervyn Richards, OBE, international BIM expert and author of the BIM Level 2 standard. Just to let everyone know, Mervyn's talk is about an hour and a quarter, so we understand that people have to rush up towards the end of it, but there will be a recording which I'll be sending out to everyone. Before I hand over to Mervyn, also just want to point out to yourself who we've also confirmed from up and coming webinars, but very strong lineup. Firstly, we've got Dr. Anne Kemp, Director of BIM over at Atkins. She's just newly been appointed the Vice Chair of Build Smart and also Chair of various different action groups. And also David Phillip, Director of BIM at ACOM and Head of BIM on the UK BIM Task Force. So anyway, without further ado, if everyone wants to listen to, I'll pass you over to Mervyn.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy. I hope everybody can hear me now. Just like to start by saying welcome. And what I'm going to be doing today to set the scene for what is BIM Level 2 and what is it you really need to be looking at to be ready for 2016. That will then follow on, as Andy has suggested, with some education and some good advice on how to put these things into motion. However, if there are any questions that you have that you would like to ask today, we have already had quite a number, by the way, and most of them have been dealt with in the presentation. But if there are any you need clarifying as we go through, please put them in the chat box and we will stop from time to time to answer the relevant ones. So thanks very much for that. So where do we start? Andy has suggested, my name is Mervyn Richards. I'm visiting professor at the University of Reading and have been involved in developing a lot of these standards, processes, procedures, methodology for quite a long time, over 20 years, certainly with government-funded research. My company is MR1 Consulting Limited, but also education, etc., is also presented through another company I have, the Avanti Partnership with Paul Shilcock. So this BIM webinar is BIM Task Group BIM Level 2, which we state as information management. The term BIM is being reduced more and more, and if you look at the documents, which I'm going to show you need to look at, you will see the term BIM disappearing through those. In fact, it's hardly mentioned. The main structure here and the main thing we're looking for is information management. That is the development, collection and delivery of information throughout the project and also at the end of it. So where do we start? So BIM is 100 years in the making, unfortunately, if you didn't know, and but are you really ready for 2016, which is the title of this group of presentations. Where I'd like to start is with this particular statement. It was quite impossible for the surveyor to take out quantities from drawings such as sometimes comes from the architect's office, imperfectly finished and possibly incorrect. This was a paper presented at the RICS, and whilst you can't answer me directly, do you know what year this was actually produced? There's no need to answer because I'm just going to pop it up on the screen. It was actually at the turn of the last century, so we know what the problems are, we know they've been there for a long time, and what we're trying to do now is to overcome those problems through the action of mandate for 2016. We need the industry to change to deal with the problems that we have been reporting for the last 100 years. And just to understand what I mean by reported, we can see this through the last century that much research and many reports have been written. Reaching for the Skies with Alfred Bossum in 34, The Placing of Management of Building Contracts, Ernest Simon in 44, Communications in the Building Industry 65, I will read them out, Building Towards 2001, 89, more currently the Latham Report and also the Egan Report 1994-1998. So there has been a lot said about what is wrong with our industry and what needs to happen to make it more efficient and effective. But usually the reaction to these documents are that the industry does nothing. It continues doing the same old thing in the same old way that it's ever done. And if we start, for the moment, around 1976, the BRE actually produced some written reports on what was causing the problems in our industry, this orange document in the top left-hand corner here, which basically suggested that all information, carrying on from that RICS comment, that all information in construction is incorrect, incomplete and ambiguous, and we spend more time on the building solving problems than constructing. That was really upheld, and looking forward, the government in 1994 said, how are we doing? Have any changes come about since this statement was made? And the Latham Report demonstrated that no, it wasn't. Do exactly what they'd always done with no change. And once again tested in 1998, a further report was requested to see if anything was happening, and once again really nothing was moving in our industry. What the industry did do was to try to react to some of these points, and that is after the 1976 presentation, the CPI, or Construction Project Information Committee, was set up in 1987 to try to produce some documents. And so they produced a whole series of documents, lots of wonderful books. I don't know if anybody's ever seen them, but they're all pastel shades, 4 or 5 of them showing how to produce, to coordinate information, not just spatial coordination, but coordination, the specifications with the documents, with the drawings, making sure that there was little or no ambiguity in the supply chain. Once again, even though all these documents, people bought them, read them, possibly, there is not much evidence. All of these documents have really ended up in the libraries of different companies and organizations, but nothing was ever done to implement change. It really came about, the biggest change came in prior to the Terminal 5 in the 1990s, was with the collapse of Heathrow Express, the tunnels at Heathrow Express, when Egan was actually the CEO of BAA. And one of the health and safety reports that he received was that after the collapse, the Health and Safety Inspectorate couldn't find a large proportion of the information they needed to find out why the tunnels had collapsed, and suggested to BAA that in any future major projects they should capture and set up an audit trail of all documents that were produced during the project, what the design requirements are, what the decisions were that were made, how the design came about, and to look at the production information. And so what happened at Heathrow Express, a single model environment was generated. So this was a single source of information provided out of, strangely enough, the drawing offices or the drawing office printing shops in Poyle, just west of Heathrow Express. So all the information was kept on the central server there, and the only way you could access that was through dedicated lines from your offices. So the concept of a single source of information, fully managed, sharing information, was conceived. What BAA were also doing, unbeknownst to the teams, was that they had employed an American organization, Anderson Consulting, to measure the effects of this change of methodology. And they did, and they produced a document called Document 19, which said that 20% of the costs at Heathrow Express had actually been saved by the use of these new methodologies, and suggested that they should be implemented at Terminal 5, which indeed they were. The main problem at Terminal 5, however, was that because people hadn't taken too much notice of the methodologies that were required, BAA had to set up an extensive education, a school within the project, to teach and educate people on how to use the technologies to the best advantage and how to collaborate with one another in this single model environment. I've used that term model there for the moment, and we will come up against this as we go through the presentation. The environment was nothing really to do with 3D modelling. It was just using the term model to mean the best environment that we could produce to manage data. And it was later changed to Common Data Environment, or the CDE, as it's now known in BS 1192-2007. So the origins of the CDE actually go way back to around about 1995. So these processes and methodologies were used at Terminal 5 to very good effect, and risk was very much reduced. So some of the things that came out of that, very quickly, we all know the project. It's the largest single airport building in the world, or was. It sits at the east end of Heathrow Airport. Our connections to Paddington through the project I've mentioned, Heathrow Express. Original budget costs of 4.3 billion. And the new project processes, as I've suggested, were introduced that had been tested on the Heathrow Express project after the tunnel collapsed. The outcome of this testing and the lessons learned was that it was an imperative that the client was involved in maintaining the vision. And certainly this is something that was very much stated in both the Egan and the Latham report. And that is the client.
Sorry, Mervyn, can I quick a few issues?
Centre.
The sound. I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
Sorry, Andy, what was that?
I was just saying there's a few issues.
I'm getting some strange feedback on you.
Yeah, I was just saying there's a few issues with the sound. So I was just saying if you could if you could maybe tie that. I was just making you aware there's a few issues on your side of things.
Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you fine now. Yeah, we can hear you, Mervyn.
Yes, you're still breaking up to me. I'll continue anyway. See what. Okay. So lost the thread there for a moment. Okay. It's Terminal 5. The parts of the project, we couldn't obviously measure the whole thing. It was far too big, but on those quality streams that we did measure, considerable savings were found in the process, the de-risking of the project, and removing certainly the spatial coordination problems that we were finding and had been recorded earlier. The outcome of that was that the CPI produced in 2003 this document called Production Information, which tried to demonstrate how collaboration and coordination between teams could be used to best advantage, and taking all the learning and knowledge out of Terminal 5. So that was produced in 2003. Sorry about that. And what happened was that the industry still didn't react as fast as the government would have liked. And so in 2004, the DTI at that time put up some funding, £750,000, And what they were saying to us was, we don't want any further research, we don't want any further development. What we want you to do is to take what you know, all of the documentation, all these books that have been produced beforehand, all of the university research, and take it onto projects which the government would pay us as consultants to do, to educate and mentor the teams. And then a further team was brought in by the government to measure and to test that, make sure that what we said was happening and could be achieved actually happened. So these were not only tested, they were actually measured to make sure that the results were there. Some of the features and benefits that came out of that, the program was known as Avanti, by the way, was that there were quite a number of projects where the teams were mentored, the common data environment methodologies it was in place, collaborative learning was encouraged, and the projects were actually measured. Three of those, three significant ones: Endeavour House, which was an Egan project out at Stansted. It's still there as you approach the main terminals at Stansted. You can see it up on the left-hand side. I have to say it looks very much like the visualization that you see there. Palace Exchange, which is actually the redevelopment of Enfield Town Centre. And then the largest of the projects that we did was St Helens and Knowsley Hospitals with Vinci. So Endeavour House was actually Lang O'Rourke, Palace Exchange was Costaines, and St Helens and Knowsley of this work. Endeavour House is significant in all of this. It was what was demonstrated in using the new methodology, that there was a £365,000 saving, roughly 9.8% of the outturn project cost, which represents 50% of the expected overspend seen on previous buildings in a set of 5. Bit garbled, but what it's saying is there were 5 of these buildings that were going to be built. 2 of them had already been built, and the expected increase in price of 20 to 25%, which has been shown on many projects, actually occurred. At the 3rd building, a team was put into place to actually implement the processes that we had used at Heathrow Express and at Terminal 5 to see what the impact would be. And 50%, representing 9.8% of the project cost, was actually removed from the building costs on the 3rd building. It also reduced 4 weeks reduction in the construction time itself. So this really tested the processes used at Terminal 5 and Heathrow Express and demonstrated that they worked. An interesting history here is that the next project, the 4th building in the series, was actually carried out by a different team, and they didn't implement any of the new methodologies. And the results of that was that the building costs actually went back up again with the expected 20% overspend that we'd found on other projects. So this proved that you could, by changing your processes and methodologies, have a great impact on the project itself. Reduction in costs for the client, reduction in time to delivery, but what we also found was that everybody in the process won. So the client was BAA Linton, who are the developers of land around the BAA airports, and particularly in office buildings. Architects were 3D Reed, now known, yes, 3D Reed, now known. Bureau Happold, Lang Morrison, Knutson, and O'Rourke. Lang Morrison Knutson, by the way, was the construction management group within the John Lang group of companies. Palace Exchange was the Costain project. Once again, ING was real estate was the client, 3D Reed again involved as the architect, Giffords and Bourne Steel as the engineers, and Costain as the contractor. The outcome of this work, by training and mentoring the people, was £3 million in saving on the project costs to the client, a 25% reduction in the design iterative cycle. What was interesting in that, although we couldn't get figures from the architects at that time, they did actually specify that they were using 25 less resource in creating the design and were recreating it in much less time. The contractor's profit margin was increased from 2% to 4%, so a 100% increase in the contractor's profit margin. all positive actions of using this method of working. St Helens and Knowsley Hospital was a slightly different project, in as much as it was going to run beyond the research period of the funded work that the government had made available. The client was Vinci, PFI, so this is a contractor as client wanting to look and apply new methodologies. Architect was Capital Percy Thomas, Arabs as the engineers, and Vinci Construction as the contractor. And these are some of the results that we got from the teams measuring themselves against a pre-agreed methodology. So the feedback from the design team, Ian Cowdery, who was the CAD manager at R.W. Gregory, was using the SMP, that is the standard method and procedure, and the St Helens project extranet, so bringing in a common data environment using an extranet, has significantly reduced the time to access the architects and the structural engineers' design. That was actually an 80% reduction in time finding information, ensuring that they obtained the correct reference files in the correct format that had been approved, actually, so bad word spelling there, for design coordination. The feedback also from Deborah Brown, who was the new hospital's St Helens project extranet administrator, was that implementing the Avanti procedure had removed the Taylor Woodrow team, now Vinci of course, team's confusion in accessing design information during cost finalisation stages, and had resulted in the design team policing themselves. So they knew what information they had produced, what was the quality of that information, they had checked it, and they had specified its use for reuse by others in the team. The last quote that came out of this was by Rennie Chadwick, who was Design Management Director at the time, that this successful implementation of the Avanti procedure on St Helens has given confidence in applying the procedures on subsequent projects. This design procedure will become our company standard. And as I understand it from them, this is what they employ on the majority of their projects where they are certainly the client, so the contractor as client. Skanska, by the way, as Skanska as client on the Barts in London project, also employed the same methodologies, and considerable savings were actually found through that project as well. What this is also showing that there is a move away from government as client, but there is also a need for the contractor as client to want to use these new processes being defined by the government. So moving forward, and at the start of the government mandate, what we found, so we're at 2009 to 2012, the strategy and mandate came out at 2011, was that the outcome of some of these things have been picked up by the government, and certainly by Paul Morrell, who made the statement, we're only just beginning to understand the scale of what can be achieved and the amount of waste that can be eliminated from the system. So the government was convinced by certainly the production of the information BS 1192-2007, just slightly predates that, and wanted to apply it into government projects. So if we look at government as client and its involvement in all of this, I've already mentioned the Latham reports, the Egan reports. They also continued into Accelerating Change in 2002, Never Waste a Good Crisis by Andrew Wostenholme in 2009, who was obviously the construction director at Terminal 5 in the latter stages. And some of the other documents that's been produced by government looking at infrastructure cost reviews 2010, and looking at how they were going to deliver some of the requirements of government, more hospitals, more schools, more infrastructure, with the monies they had available, not forgetting that the incoming government realised that there was no money left in the coffers. And so this drive to try to drive out waste, certainly in the capital projects being paid for by government, became part of the BIM strategy in 2011, which stated that they had identified what the UK government as a client would need to do to encourage the widespread adoption of BIM approaches to improve project delivery and operational performance, particularly in the areas of demonstrating improvement in cost, value and carbon. What happened in the early days of this, carbon was actually dropped for a short while whilst we got involved in bringing down the capital costs. The carbon is back in play, certainly with the delivery of good quality information into the asset information model and the ability to manage the project to much better carbon performances. It also stated as a hypothesis that government as client can derive significant improvement in cost value on carbon through the use of open shareable asset information. This wasn't an absolute statement about open BIM, but it certainly started off the government's involvement in that discussion. But it is about shareable asset information. It also at that time came up against, and I'm sure you've all seen the diagram, and why it's taken it to its heart was the Richards diagram for maturity. How could we actually achieve and use BIM to better advantage through these processes and procedures that have been developed, tested and measured to give them significant cost savings? But more importantly, how did they and how do they as clients help to get the industry to change and embed these new methodologies? And so the idea of these different stages of development came about, and BIM level 2, you can see the big red line there, was seen as an achievable capability, certainly by 2016 and obviously into the following years. So what's the difference here? You can see on the diagram, I will just go through it quickly. Level 0 is CAD as it used to be, drawings, lines, arcs, text, and the use of CAD, the new technologies in that arena, made no difference whatsoever to the outcomes of the projects, because the drawings using CAD were produced using the same methods and processes that have been used on the drawing board, and so incomplete, inaccurate and ambiguous information was still being generated. At level 1, certainly through CPIC and the production information document, change started to come about, and we started to get, certainly from a spatial coordination point of view, less incidents of clash within the documentation, and certainly on the construction sites. And obviously the technology moved into the 3D field, but this was mainly about visualization and what does it look like, which has its place in engaging the client, but didn't really make too much significant difference to reducing clashes. What was needed was to take what has become the BIM software for architects, structural engineers, for facilities managers, even for bridge engineers, which are all vertical discipline applications. And what we needed to do was to get coordination and interoperability horizontally across all of these programs. And so we started to develop new user guides. Apart from BS 1192-207, the government sponsored the development of a number of other documents which we'll go through in a moment. The idea is to get the industry moving forward all up to level 2, which will create a foundation for level 3. Just like to state at this moment, I've made this comment before and I get picked up on it, that we're not yet ready for level 3. Some people say they're already at level 3 and beyond because they work in a single data environment. Well, it needs much, much more than that to just do level 2. You can work in a single environment, single database environment if you like, even at level 2. We need people to understand how they produce information, how they share it, and how they make sure that the information that they are sharing is accurate. So checking processes, all these sorts of methodologies have to be embedded. They're all in BS 1192-2007. So coming out of this documentation, the BIM strategy, the 2011 strategy, other things that came out was really a number of key barriers to the growth and efficient operation of the construction market. So understanding what they wanted to happen and having the documentation to make it happen, they also realized that there were going to be a number of barriers and resistances to people taking this stuff on board. And we've seen lots of it about who's going to pay me to do it differently, who's going to write the procedures and the methodologies. Well, the procedures and methodologies have already been written. The measurements, as I've shown you, have demonstrated that the industry will become more efficient and you can make good profits out of this. So this is about investing in your business to be able to offer these services not just at home but also abroad. As we will see, this has now moved into very much a global marketplace. The strategy objectives of the government will be require fully collaborative BIM Level 2, which we've just seen, with all profits and asset information, documentation and data being electronic, moving to the digital world, as a minimum by 2016. The staged plan will be published with mandated milestones showing measurable progress at the end of each year. And if you'd like to go to the BIM Task Group website, you can see where those measurements and the progress that's been enabled over the last few years has occurred, and how we are moving very quickly towards having a full set of documentation for implementation before and certainly in 2016. Some of the other documents that do need to be picked up here: government soft landings policy. This is now moving to a BS. It's being embedded in a new British standard, well, in an old British standard that's being rewritten at the moment. The soft landings policy is that at briefing stage, the first tier contractor or supplier, the architect and the contractor or constructor, will have to ensure that the buildings delivered, the projects delivered, actually conform and perform to the brief that's been given at the beginning of the project by the client through the EIRs, IORs and AIRs. It's also part of the industrial BIM strategy that we make our industry far more efficient, 25% more efficient, because we need to build capacity in the marketplace so that we can do more work for reduced money, but also enable us to go into the global market to win more jobs. So profit for UK. And that brings us into the growth through BIM. So BIM by 2013 was seen as quite a significant requirement for moving forward not only construction but also growth of the country itself. So this is a UK PLC activity, if you like. Why does the government need these documents? It's to get everybody up to speed to be able to deliver what they require. I must express on you that you should really download all of these documents if you haven't done so. They are free of charge. If you find them difficult to download from the government task group website, I have to say they are spread around it and you have to search for them. You can go to the BRE website where they've been collected into one particular folder and you can download the whole lot at one go. So, government as client. It's set up a 4-year strategy for BIM implementation that will change the dynamics and behaviour of the construction supply chain. So they really are serious about embedding BIM, but BIM according to the UK strategy, not BIM according to the software providers. This is not about visualization, it's not just about 3D modeling, it's about all information, the management, development, generation and delivery of information into the asset information model at the end of the day. So whilst it's still got BIM at the top of this document, we must keep thinking in terms of how do we deliver information. As I've already said, you can have a look at the BIM Task Group website for all of the documentation that you will need to implement 1192, the strategy into 2016, or go to the BRE website where you can find all the documents in one go. So, BIM Level 2. We know what it is, we know where we've got to go, how do we achieve it? The 3 major documents that you should concern yourself with to start off with are these 3, which is BS 1192-207, which is the common data environment and all of the standards, methods and procedures that need to be embedded and implemented not only within your office but within projects as we move forward. The thing about this British standard was to try to derive and make suggestions on a single standard that could be taught to everybody so that it could be used in any office, any design office, any construction office, etc. So that we all worked in the same way as we did years ago. We all knew what the information was going to look like, and we all knew what we were supposed to deliver. With the advent of CAD, there has been a tendency for everybody to develop their own standard, which has now given us to this wonderful word standards. Too many S's and too many standards. And I do know of organisations, companies that I've been into where they can have standards not only in different offices around the country, but even in the same building. This is obviously extremely wasteful and can cost quite a lot of money in retraining people constantly. From a project environment, one of the things that came out of the research was we always have to retrain because a client asks for something different every time. If people follow this and if clients adopt it and if they put these into their contractual documents, there is only one way of working. So you should reduce your education and training budgets by everybody knowing what they should do through this one methodology and not retraining on every project. So BS 1192-207 is how do we compile information? What does the model look like? How do we check it? How do we make sure that it is clash-free? The document PAS 1192 Part 2 is about the management of the project process with the BS 1192-207 at the core. I just want to get people to understand that PAS 1192 Part 2 does not replace BS 1192-207. It is an addition to BS 1192-207. And something to understand is that those processes in BS 1192-207 will also be used, slightly modified, for the asset information model as well as the project information model as defined in PAS 1192 Part 3. So within these three documents, what we actually have is how do I develop information, how do I manage information, and how do I deliver information to the client. So that's why I'm putting these up as the three major documents out of the full set that really should be looked at and implemented if you're going to move into these projects in 2016. Simple diagram out of PAS 1192 just to show where these documents sit. The green diagram in the middle of this this image is actually BS 1192-2007 and looks at the development of information through the project, the plan of work. So the stages of the CIC plan of work shown here through strategy, which is 0 by the way, through the briefing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The stages remain. The names of those stages may change on different projects. Obviously we'll have to wait until the new plan of work, the digital plan of work, is finally published for us to know exactly what those stages will represent. So that's BS 1192-2007, which builds on graphical information, non-graphical information, and other forms of documentation and information required for the project delivery and management. The blue circle, that indicated by those large blue arrows, from CAPEX start to OPEX start, are what PAS 1192 Part 2 is all about. So how do I react to the employer's information requirements? What sort of team do I need to put together to tender for it? I need to specify what my team looks like, what their capabilities and competencies will be, and how that capability will be able to deliver what the client's asking for. This is all part of a pre-qualification, of course, so the client has some standard information across all the teams so that they can make a selection of who is the team most likely to be able to deliver what is required. Once the project is let, of course, the BIM execution plan has to be verified, has to be confirmed, the team has to be confirmed, the final delivery plans have to be put in place, and then mobilizing the team, carry out the brief, concept, definition, design, build and commission, and hand over at closeout. And the information at each of these stages being verified, being checked, reviewed and signed off as being complete and satisfying the requirements of the EIR. So that's PAS 1192 Part 2. PAS 1192 Part 3 takes us beyond OPEX start, operational expenditure, into the maintenance and in-use phases of the life cycle of the project. Just one thing to add to this is, although we put CapEx start at the top there with the employer's information requirement, there are two forms of start at CapEx. One is for a client that does a non-serial client who is just building perhaps a one-off project which he's going to sell on, perhaps a developer. So they will start with just a brief of what they want. But for the serial clients, that is government as client, for instance, there will be a lot of information available for their projects that they're already maintaining to populate the employer's information requirements, certainly from the point of view of asset information and operational information that's going to be required during the new project. So we have two start points, one with very little background information, and the other from the serial client with a lot of information already available through the asset register. So those are the three main documents that you really need to look at. There are others, and there are others yet to be published, shown Uniclass at the front of that, but there's also the digital plan of work. There's also in writing at the moment BS 1192 Part 5, which is about security. There is a big problem in securing information, where you keep it, how you keep it, not just from a government point of view, but also from your office point of view. Have you got all of your information secure, or can it actually leak out of the building? There's also a requirement to some degree is to reduce the amount of information through visualizations in particular that's actually put out there into the magazines. They all look great on the front cover, but do they actually give away a lot of other information that shouldn't really be in the public domain? So that's BS 1192 Part 5. There is at the back of PAS 1192 Part 2, which I think most people miss, and that is this thing on construction tolerances. There are many standards out there about construction tolerances, but the new one is being compiled at the moment to bring that up to date. Why do you need to know about construction tolerances? Well, the model that we deliver, the graphical representation of it, that we deliver into CapEx is not the design model. Be very clear of this. Some of the information will be produced by designers, and where their contracts require it, they will still have to deliver the updated, as constructed information. I'm avoiding the term as built. This isn't as built of old, where you just mark up some drawings demonstrating where changes have taken place. This is updating the model so that as you hand it over, it fully represents, physically represents what was built. To do that, you need to set construction tolerances. Anything that is out of tolerance will have to be measured and the models brought up to date to demonstrate exactly what has been built. The question here is, who owns the model and who makes those changes? Well, most of the information at this stage is owned by the contractor and indeed by the contractor's specialist designers. And even those contractors, those suppliers that are installing M&E, MEP is a great example. They are the people that will have to update their models that they have produced that demonstrates what they were going to build, and then they will have to update them to demonstrate what they did build. Why do we need this information to be delivered so accurately? Well, one of the things moving forward, and the new technologies, as we know, is immersive reality. What we want to be able to do is to walk around our projects with our iPads, with our Google Glasses, whatever, and be able to see, certainly from a maintenance point of view, where the services are behind panels, up in the ceilings or whatever. It is no good looking at a 3D model of the building such that when you can see what you want to get to in terms of MEP controls or whatever, and you take the panel off the wall and there's nothing there. It's absolutely pointless delivering a 3D model that will not be usable in the future. It is also why, in use, the model needs to be continuously updated during the asset information or in-use model to make sure that these things can be found, the new technologies can be used, and what is there really in the 3D model is really represented in the building. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, possibly 10 documents that will have to be understood and enable you to deliver the 2016 requirement at BIM Level 2. So you really need, at this time, to take those first 3 documents, fully understand those and implement them, and then build on them with the knowledge and the requirements that will be demonstrated in these other documents as they become available. So first of all, let's get hold of the design end of this, and I'm also talking about the contractor's design portion as well, and make sure we can produce good quality information and manage it properly. There are other documents and other blockers in our industry that have had to be dealt with whilst we've been putting together these documents. Part of the problem is people are saying to us, why do we need all these documents? You know, there's far too many to actually implement. Well, there are a number of documents, but they're all there because the blockers to implementing BIM have been put up by lots of different people. And so to get rid of these blockers, we've had to go out and answer some questions. So the first of these was, well, how is this going to change my contract? What is the legal and contractual changes to my requirement? Am I going to be asked to do something that I'm not going to be paid for? And am I attracting additional risk? Well, the BIM protocol document being produced by the CIC, it is the legal and contractual document that should be attached, or is suggested is attached to any contract you go into where BIM is being asked for. So the protocol lays down the requirements and the responsibilities on not only the supplier, but much more importantly, there are responsibilities on the client to tell the suppliers exactly what he wants delivered, what he is going to pay for to be delivered. So there is no lack of understanding in the client-employer situation as to what's actually required and is going to be specified during the brief. So most of those legal problems have been solved, or have at least been looked at and have been laid out in this this protocol. IP was a big one. You're going to steal my information, you're going to reuse my object libraries, you're going to, I don't know, from an architectural point of view it may look as if somebody's going to steal my design of the dome and build another one. That's not what this is about. A lot of this happens to be the object libraries that people invest in, architects invest in, structural engineers invest in, that they would share with somebody else who may take away or reuse those libraries themselves without paying for them. Now that's also dealt with within the protocol. Part of BS 1192-207 also ensures that there is an audit trail of information, and if it is a belief that somebody has taken those object libraries and reused them for themselves, you can exercise the common data environment and find out if anybody has actually done that. So that was one blocker that we had to get rid of. It's a CIC document and is out there. Another one that you should look at to understand that the legal and contractual requirements have been considered. The second one we run into and continue to run into, strangely enough, is, I've mentioned it just now, is I don't want to share my information, you may steal it. I don't want to share my information, you may change it. I can't share my information because my insurer won't let me. Well, the task group has, and the people on the task group that produced this document with the CIC spoke to the insurers, and the reaction is quite an interesting one. What the insurers are saying, if you follow the processes in BS 1192-207 and PAS 1192 Part 2, then a full audit trail is kept of all of the transactions between all of the members of the supply chain. So we can see whose responsibility it was to produce information, what information was produced, was it changed by others, etc., etc. They are actually saying they are very comfortable if these standards, BS 1192-207 and PAS 1192 Part 2, are implemented properly. If you are going to use any other form of methodology, then you should make sure your insurers understand what other standards and methods you may employ to see if they are actually happy with those bespoke standards. So a lot of the barriers to implementation and a lot of the blockers that are usually put up by individuals and individual companies have indeed been looked at, and there are a number further documents, not just these two. There's another one on project management requirements as well. So lots of documents, they're all there, they're all ready to be used, the work is being carried out, and what we've shown, the benefits have been proven and everybody wins in this process, and those documents help you to achieve it. So risk reduced for the client, I'm just going to state it once again. Waste removed 20% of project costs over past projects. That is the government target. That's what they're looking for. It is not just about reducing the footprint cost of a building during design and brief. It is about the removal of waste where costs have accelerated and time has accelerated during the delivery of the project. So yes, the client is certainly looking for you to come up with the best footprint cost, but then at the other end of the process to make sure that you still deliver it without this waste that has been measured for so many years. There is reduced risk for the contractor, so the client gets benefit, reduced risk for the contractor, as we've seen from Costains, increasing the margins by 100%, and also the profits increase for designers, 25% reduction in resource employed. So all of this documentation properly applied has been measured and the benefits have been seen and demonstrated, and the government is happy to adopt these in moving forward for adoption for the mandate in 2016. One of the things that came up, and unfortunately we're going to go through, in any good presentation you should always tell them. Excuse me for saying that, but we had a lot of questions originally delivered as you registered, which was, well, what about behaviour? Well, collaboration is working together to deliver the required outcomes. This is about behaviour. Everybody has to accept, and everybody has to accept their responsibilities, and everybody should share. Talking is what collaboration is really about. If you have a problem that somebody else can solve, talk to them from another company, wherever that may be. So change the behaviour, be collaborative, share with others, not just data, but also the information. Collaboration is achieved through agreed processes and procedures. Lots of questions there is, we need new standards, we need new processes, we need new procedures, somebody should write them. These are questions that were only asked last week. Well, we have done that, and the processes, procedures, the standards, methods and procedures are in BS 1192-2007. Collaboration is, however, technology-aided management of those processes and procedures, usually through a good management process. It could be an extended extranet. There are other software solutions available on the market that can deliver PAS 1192 Part 2 and the common data environment out of BS 1192-2007. Collaboration requires a whole through-life understanding of the project delivery process. So it's not just understanding how you produce a bit of information, a 3D model, a drawing at one particular stage in the process. You should really understand how this information flows right the way through the life cycle of the project and how important it is when it's handed over into PAS 1192 Part 3. Collecting and delivering information is another requirement here, which we haven't mentioned this BS. It was in the pack I showed just now, but I didn't mention it, which was BS 1192 Part 4. This is about delivery of information, or COBE, as it's commonly called. The separation of graphical representation and the sharing of that information through IFCs or whatever other means is about the changing and exchanging the graphical representation, but the data is much more easy to collect and to share through a common format or a common framework as defined in COBE. So we do have all of the things we need: behavioural change, standards, methods and procedures or processes, management processes, how do we deliver this, collaborative processes in after use in the life cycle, and the delivery of that information through a structured standard of BS 1192 Part 4. So what does a collaborative system look like? Well, the first thing to understand is that the information model is not just about the 3D representation and visualization. The information model that we talk about in all of these documents is and does include the graphical model. It also includes all of the non-graphical data, and that could be in the form of databases, spreadsheets. Some of it is held within the 3D model, but the vast majority of it will be held in external databases with reference and links back to individual objects within the data model itself. And certainly as we move away from file-based collaboration to object-based collaboration, this linking of information between databases and objects will become more and more important. And it is about all other forms of documentation. And what do we mean by that? Well, it may be a video, it may be a picture, it might be a record, it might be a meeting record that's been kept digitally or otherwise. It's about any form of information, no matter how it's derived or presented, has to be collected and managed. So the common data environment, for instance, does not just manage graphical data, it also manages non-graphical data to a large extent, and it also enables you to link documentation extracts, material extracts, things like that, from the graphical representation in the federated model itself. So information model, as opposed to 3D model, means all forms of information required to for the successful delivery of the project. So what does it look like? The common data environment, hopefully you've all seen this, is depicted by these 4 squares. Work in progress, where you can generate your own office, perhaps information in your own office perhaps, or linked into a common environment with all the other project teams. The main feature of the common data environment is that all information should be checked, reviewed and approved for some purpose before sharing it with others. What we need to do is to build confidence within the supply teams that they are going to be able to use trusted material. So agreeing what the standards, methods and procedures are in your project, so you know how those checks and reviews and approval processes will be carried out, will give you confidence that the information you're going to reuse, has actually been checked and reviewed for a purpose. Once you've reached the delivery cycle, or a stage in the delivery cycle, you will have to produce information that the client needs to authorize to move into the published area. What we mean by published documentation is something that's been signed off for a contractual purpose. It might be design completion, or it might be information delivered for somebody else to complete the design, particularly in the contractor's design portion. But it's usually reviewed either by the employer's representative and authorized by the employer's representative, or by the client. There will be different routes to achieving this. All transactions, whether they be between work in progress and shared, or shared into the published area, will be recorded in the archive, so that the insurers can actually check to see what, in the case of a disaster or whatever, what decisions were made, and perhaps be able to understand why something's happened, in the event of the Heathrow experience, of course. Or it may be for some legal requirement, or that the teams themselves believe that somebody has been messing around with their information. So a full audit trail is maintained within the CDE. And at the moment, it is a file management-based system. It works well, it's been tested, the outputs that we require have been well demonstrated. We will move further forward into digital management as opposed to file management through single databases and objects. For the moment, however, the file management system will be supported by databases linking into information into objects within those files. Two-way transfer, of course, read them in both directions. We also need these databases for non-graphical developers to actually manipulate information, to take the shared information in data forms, to carry out some computation with them, and to return further information. It may be costing, for instance, it may be payments into the contract, whatever. But we will have to have the ability for non-graphically educated people to access information and to use it and reuse it in the same way as the graphical activity is carried out. What we also need is an email system or some form of transmittal so that we can keep in touch with the wider project and maintain this supply of knowledge, certainly any transactions in the permittal sense, but also to make sure that we have all of the emails and to use the email systems to inform people. Email should not be used to instruct people as such contractually. If you are going to deliver a document, then you can use it through the email system, but it must be detached. It's the only way in which the contractual integrity of the project can be maintained. If people give instructions in plain language through an email system, you will have no control and no way of tracking it. So you need to make sure that you are in full charge of the project. So it's transmittals, email discussions, the data itself, the databases, right the way from design, right the way through from the brief until handover and delivery. This is an information management system. Where are we going? What do we need? We need to evolve. We need software evolution. We need something different. A lot of the software at the moment is adequate for where we are, but once we start to implement these processes and procedures, new software will evolve and it will be made available. Of that I'm absolutely sure. But what we also need is for people to change and to evolve out of this. We cannot stay where we are. We cannot say doing the same things that we did last year or the year before. So people have to grow through education, through training, become more efficient and more usable, go out and win more jobs. So software is evolving and people need to change and evolve. We need better educated and trained professionals. This is being dealt with at the moment. What I'm trying to get at here is the future is not CAD. The future is about something else. It's about the generation, better quality information, with everybody understanding their responsibilities to make sure that the information is the best that we can possibly get to give the best outturn of any given project with reduced risk and capability. Happier people, happier workforce, happier clients, etc. But it's not about drawing and it's not about visualization. They are there, they have their place, but that is not the main thrust. Training and education needs to be at the center of the implementation of the processes and also to develop the foundation for the future, and in particular a move to level 3. The task group have just completed the Learning Outcomes Framework, the LOF, to enable education and training to a consistent standard. What that means is they've had to produce some documentation to tell certainly the universities and others what needs to be taught, or certainly what the outcomes of the teaching have to be to make them BIM enabled for the future. We also need it to move into a more formal requirement for certification. The certification is not there at the moment, but we are moving towards that, and certainly the Learning Outcomes Framework will be part of that. Further work will be done on that during this year. There are, however, a number of awarding bodies that already give certification and accreditation, particularly through the BRE and the Lloyd's Register. Not UCAS approved at the moment. They are awarding bodies in their own right and can do this. Certainly the BRE and the Avanti Partnership have been running these programs for the last year, and they are consistent with the LOF, the Learning Outcomes Framework. In summary, and also to leave a bit of time for some questions, we have researched the background research for over 100 years. We know what the problems were, defined at the beginning. We have in government investing in research for over 20 years. For those that don't know it, during the 1980s and 1990s, the government invested almost £20 million in looking at and researching the new technologies and how they could be used to make the industry far more efficient. And as we saw, that has been shown, the outcome has been shown in developing of the standards, the testing of those and the measuring of them. We know they work, we know they pay back, we know they give everybody profits, everybody will win. And we have developed and applied the processes and procedures, we've tested them, as I just said, and measured the results of the collaborative environment. BIM is not software solutions. It is about the total process of collaboration. The software solutions do aid us in that process. Where are we at the moment, as seen by the rest of the world? We do lead the world in the use of BIM in the way in which we are applying it through this methodology that the government is now looking to be produced and mandated in 2016. It is a collaborative process to deliver consistent information with reduced risk. It may seem like a bit of a statement that we do lead the world. Well, we do lead the world, we know it, because they've told us. To say that the UK Level 2 is limited to the completion of UK and government-funded projects would be slightly erroneous at this time. The UK is currently seen as providing leadership in the development of strategies and processes delivering information management. And this can be seen in some awards that have been carried out, certainly through FIATech in the US to the UK last year. What you may not know is that France has already declared that it wants to mandate a large proportion of this by 2017. Germany has declared, and last month Russia, of all places, also declared that they want to implement BIM in the relationship of the UK methodology as specified in the UK. In Europe, as I've said, with France and Germany, and in other areas, we can also see the adoption of the UK processes. How do we know? Well, this year has seen the adoption of the processes and methodologies from the global arena. The ISO committee, the International Standards Organization, voted from insistent by their membership for the development of a new ISO 19650, which is to be based on the BS 1192 or the 1192 series of documents. One of the reasons this has come about is that there are certain clients, Middle Eastern and in Far East, that are now asking not just for BIM, but for BIM Level 2. A lot of the countries now don't understand what that is. And when they found out what it was, they then insisted that this become an ISO. As I say, ISO 19650, it's already underway. The teams are there, they're already developing. And the need for these processes internationally are seen as an urgent requirement. They're not waiting for documents to pass through the normal process of moving from PAS to BSs, for instance. They understand the savings and the methodologies and what will happen if they can implement these things, reducing risk and improving margins. So 2 committees have been formed to complete this work. The ISO committee has a membership taken from the UK, from the BS 1192 committees, BS555 in the UK, and a number of people from the international committees. Those members from the UK are travelling at the moment from country to country. They've been to Berlin, they've been to Canada, Toronto. They are in Milan during this month. Apart from that, there have been 4 meetings of the editing committee for the ISO, generating the briefs, the brief documents. The UK working group will also guide the international representatives to ensure that the ISO will continue to support the UK requirements. We always have to be careful when these move into the international arena that people want to change them. We know they work. We will try to keep them as close to the standards as we possibly can. We do not want any changes. So the committees are well formed. They've already held a number of meetings. There's been 3 meetings of the editing committee, the editorial committee here, and work is expected to be complete within 18 months, which is much quicker than most other PASs. They can run on for a number of years. It is hard work. Not only are we convincing people at home and delivering it at home, we're now having to have this discussion on a much wider front, and there are obviously linguistic problems there as well in understanding what the technical phrases are that we need to use. But the work is well underway and is being adopted. So we can only take the past year as a resounding success, but the government strategy, the hard work of the BS55 committee, the knowledge of its authors, the provision of an educational framework, moving towards certification and accreditation, the global acceptance of the UK preeminent position in the development of real value, and to providing a digital foundation for the future. So, are you ready? Or are you really ready for 2016? How much of this have you put in place? Are you putting it in place? Or are we going to come back for another discussion? Will it be another BIM Groundhog Day? Will we just carry on and do what we always did? Are we going to be having this conversation again tomorrow? Well, no. Change is inevitable and you cannot stop it. Unfortunately, there is this thing known as the S-curve, if anybody has ever looked at these things, that shows how things change and develop and are adopted into the mainstream as they become defined. And then we reach a tipping point where we can generate a new S-curve, new innovation. Some people will drop off. They will continue to do what was always done yesterday. Others will move forward. And obviously where we are at the moment is we're past the tipping point. We're moving towards digital construction. It will become the new norm. Change should be embraced. It's inevitable. You are not going to stop BIM coming into place. And change is speeding up. Look ahead to see when the next S-curve will appear. It's already there. It is level 3. So make sure you've implemented level 2 and be ready for the next change in all of this in a few years' time. We must also, this one always gets me, this slide, we must look at this in the context of digital Darwinism. Will the technology evolve faster than the ability to adapt it? I don't think it will. I think as these things move, it's already been proven with digital, with phones, with smartphones, etc. People embrace the new technologies really quickly indeed, if it can be seen to aid them in some way, and I'm sure that's what's going to happen here. We have, however, got the problem of will those that don't evolve and leverage its value ultimately become extinct? Will people drop off? Will they not be able to make the change? But I can assure you that BIM is not an if or a when, but how fast are we going to move there? So once again, are you ready? How will you react? Will you just bury your head in the sand, or will you accept what's there and implement it and move forward? So thank you very much for listening. I think we've just hit 1 hour and 14 minutes. 1 minute less than I expected to do. I don't know if we have any other questions, Andy?
Yeah, I've got a few. Yeah, thanks, Mervyn. That's really helpful, and I'm sure I'll go along with everyone to thank you for your time here. I've got a few questions that have come up. Soft landing. What is the status of it in relation to level 2 BIM? is it still part of level 2 BIM deliverable?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, my screen just seems to have changed. I don't know what you're looking at the moment. No, soft landing is absolutely there. As I say, it's now being written into a British standard. There was already one there looking at, it wasn't called soft landings, but design commitment, whatever. And so to bring it into the fold of the British standards and the PASs, etc., all of the soft landings requirements are now being written into that BS. There's no need to wait for it because it's going to incorporate exactly what's in the government soft landings at the moment.
And we've got to what is sorry, gone through. What is LOD in BIM? Is it level of detail or level of development?
Or is it level of definition? Okay, let's deal with it. I think if you look in the PAS, the level of definition tries to pick up both. The level of detail is the graphical representation, and LOI is the information that needs to be delivered along with that graphical representation. There is a different level of graphical representation at the stages along the plan of work, and there is different information that also needs to be delivered at those stages. They are being well defined in the work at the moment with MVS. The work is out there with MVS to deliver the DPOW and Uniclass. That will also encapsulate the levels of definition, graphical representation and information.
What is the exact date the level 2 is required? Is it January? Is it the end of the year? Is it legal requirements? And what happens if the client does not require level 2 BIM on the project? Yeah.
But it's an interesting question, and it's an even more interesting answer. And that is, well, the government haven't waited for 2016. The government already has projects out there that are requiring and requesting BIM level 2. And quite a number of those have been let. I don't know what the exact figure is, but I did hear something like 20 had already gone out under the sort of BIM level 2 requirement. So they're already in play. So worrying about whether it's the 1st of January 2016 or whether it's the 31st of December 2016 doesn't really matter. Get ready for it now, no matter what comes out of this. I think the important thing to realize here is that this is a process that any company should be doing for their own advantage. It improves their business capabilities, it improves their margins. They can go out and win work elsewhere in the world and win that work because they're going to be much more efficient in delivering it. It doesn't have to be done on government projects. So there's no need to wait to 2016, get on with it now. What is the government situation going to be? It will be specified in the EIR. As I say, they're already there now. They will certainly be there on a lot of the projects by January the 1st, 2016, and they will increase throughout the year. It will even filter into local contracts as well, local government contracts as well, once this starts rolling. As I've already said, some of the people that are already asking for this are the contractors at clients, certainly Skanska, certainly Vinci, Costains, I understand are there, and certainly Lang O'Rourke. So, the contractor's asking for it, the client's going to be asking for it, get ready.
Okay, and we've got quite a technical one. It says PAS 1192/2. If you try and follow PAS for file and model naming revisions, i.e. PO 1.1 and PO 1.2, it really does not make sense. Neither do the status codes you put on the drawings or models or both. Can you clear this up for me?
Well, everybody says that. Where do we go back to? 1965, when we first put together. Let's deal with the file naming convention. It is not a document management structure. The file naming convention came about with over 70 different standards being looked at by a lot of people at that time. I mean, we're talking 20 odd years ago. And it was agreed that these 7 fields were the minimum number you required to structure your information, whether it be in the folder structure on Explorer, or whether it be inside an extranet or whatever. All I can tell you is that this works, it's been measured, it's been shown to work. If we go to the Olympics, for instance, where this standard was put in place, none of the contractors or the people involved there could actually agree on what the standard should be, and they set up a group of BIM managers to go out and devise a new one. After 6 years they didn't come up with anything different. So just use the one that's there. It does work, believe me. Those people that don't think the revisioning system works, and there is a whole reason behind the revisioning, P01, 1.1, you have to understand why you have the extension of the version there at 0.1, is to enable the tracking of information associated with the graphical representation. So if you do an extract, you need to know what that extract, let's say it's material schedule, which model file did it apply to. It also tracks the sequential development of the information throughout the process, and it also covers the suitability codes, or the status codes are there because somebody said, I don't want to share my information because somebody will use it for a purpose other than the one I've intended it for. So the status codes allow you to specify what people are allowed to use your information for. So if you have the information, it's not complete, but it should be accurate when you share it, and you can say you may now use this for spatial coordination or for internal review. I don't quite understand why that isn't simple to use. It's certainly worked on all the projects that we've embedded it in to date.
Okay, great.
So
and we got
it works.
It does the contract award points of the information delivery cycle diagram in PAS 1192/2 refer to the main contractual award or the appointments of the consulting services by a client?
Okay, the appointment, well, let's deal with that because it is an interesting one. The award is always to the first tier supplier, which could be the designer or it could be the contractor. All other subcontracts under those two suppliers are back-to-back contracts with subcontractors. So the architect will possibly have subcontractors in there as well, and obviously the construction contractor will have his subcontractors, which are all back-to-back contracts with him. The main contract is between the client or the employer and the first tier. Yeah. If we look at the PAS 1192 document, you have those broken arrows to the left-hand end of the diagram. It may be that the whole team is not appointed in one single EIR. It may be that the EIR from the client will say, I need somebody to write a brief for me. It may be as simple as that. So he will go out and procure somebody who is capable of producing the brief. If the answer to the brief, the answers he's looking for in the brief, say, sorry, this is not a goer, then he will most likely stop the project there and then. Very few projects go to term that are looked at in brief. It may be that he goes through brief and he wants some information out of concept, then he then procures a team, maybe the same team, it may be an additional team, to move into concept and give him some answers there. Cost certainty, perhaps. And if that says yes, go ahead, then he will move into stage 3 and the definition design will be developed. So the EIR may not be, and the client may not require, everything to be delivered on the one single contract. It may be a series of contracts that are let until he gets cost certainty, and then the main contractor will be appointed, and then that will continue through the first tier contractor. Or it may be that it's a DMB. The processes in BS 1192-207 and PAS 1192 are actually contract agnostic as well as software agnostic. So we've tried to cover all of the eventualities. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. So there's a couple of questions on the same point, but it's so why are we still seeing some government-funded departments not being interested in BIM? And then I suppose later that the question really is, do the clients have to go to BIM level 2? We are ready.
No, the clients have got to go to BIM level 2 as well. Okay, not all government departments have yet been covered. There are 40 different government departments which have had to go through a training and education process to become knowledgeable clients, and certainly all 40 of those have not yet been covered. We know the MOJ, we know Highways Agency, we know the Environmental Agency, the MOD. These have already been taken into account. The hospitals are there, or the NHS, obviously. So not all government departments are there yet. They're racing to get there by 2016. In the same way as projects like HS2 want to implement all of this, they're preparing themselves to get their supply chain in place, and they will be requiring this BIM Level 2 to be provided there. We do know of some local authorities that are already moved into BIM Level 2 and asking for it as well. I think it was Manchester County Council recently has set out the requirements. So yes, it is filtering out there. It's not 100% by any means. That's why we're into this preparation during 2015 to be able to deliver against the client's requirements in 2016. But I will just emphasize what I said before. Whether the client asks for it or not, if this is a better business process, and it is, for companies to deliver services, why wouldn't they take them on board anyway so that they could win more work and produce better profits?
Absolutely. And someone asked as well, it might be for what the BRE are doing, is how are the government capital projects teams being educated to implement BIM and PAS processes?
Oh, there is a whole team under the BIM Level 2 task group. There's a number of people. These are advisors, etc., that have been appointed. They're still out there. They're still working on it. They are people that have come out of industry. They're working in the departments to move this forward. I mean, the ICE has quite an involvement with the Highways Agency, for instance. There's other groups involved with the Environmental Agency, and there are named people on each of those teams. And those names you can find on the BIM task group. Just on that point, that people think that the BIM task group, BIM Level 2, has actually been disbanded. That's not actually true. They're still in place. They're moving into legacy. This is a normal function of government-funded work, is that once the vast majority of the work has been done, it's then handed over to industry to maintain it and move it forward. Those teams are still in place. They will be there certainly through 2015 and into the beginning of 2016, and they have funding to continue that work. The main thrust of the BIM task group at the moment is another team under Mark Bew. So Mark Bew is still there as chairman of both of them, to start delivering the BIM, the Level 3 stuff. So BIM Level 2 delivery in legacy is still there, and BIM Level 3 is also very much up and running.
Is there a CDE out there that meets all 1192 requirements?
Is there any provider of CDEs? Well, the two that we've tested, and I'm sure there are lots of others, are, and I'm not advocating these, by the way, I'm not endorsing these products, but certainly we've used ProjectWise to very great success places like Crossrail, although they have a slightly modified process there at the moment. There is also at Reading University a pure BS 1192 process being developed with Bentley on ProjectWise. But there is also, through other agencies, Cabinet comes to mind at the moment. They have implemented and tested their first stage of the common data environment. I'm sure that will be improved on as time goes forward. For projects, it is suggested that they do have the capability. I haven't actually tested it myself in recently. A-Site is another one. I understand they've been moving forward with it. And Business Collaborator is another one I've heard of. I haven't tested them all, but they are moving and they are providing products, and they will configure them to BS 1192, I'm sure.
Okay, and I know you touched on information security, but someone asked a good point regarding cyber security. In particular, I suppose cyber security maybe perhaps on a MOD project. How do you see this one going?
Well, I think you have to be careful. The security is not just about those MOD, those sensitive projects. You have to look at, there is already a standard out there, which is ISO 27001, which suggests that The cloud should not be used for government projects in particular if it isn't serviced onshore. In other words, it can't be out there not knowing where all this information is held. So there are some restrictions around the cloud use. There is security in terms of, you've mentioned some of these MOD, let's say, or AWE, or even the nuclear industry, where the idea of and the adoptance of federated models in a secured CDE is an acceptable process in security. What we mean by that is that nobody can see all of the models all at once, so not one great big single model, but lots of little ones. It's a bit like a wartime activity of, we're building a new aircraft, somebody can see the wings, somebody can see the fuselage, somebody can see the undercarriage, but nobody can see all of them except one particular agency. But this is also about the security of information. As I say, up to now people have been giving away visualizations of the project they're working on to demonstrate aren't I good. And some of those visualizations from a homeland security point of view are quite highly detailed 3D models or visualizations of 3D models. But there's also the corporate situation, is how secure is each individual office against people in their own environment taking work home innocently. Perhaps, so I've got a thumb drive here. I'll just take those drawings home. I'll take that model home. I'll work at home. I'm a good boy. Brings it back into the office, plugs it in. It's not been checked, validated, or whatever. Lots of other people use it, and it's incorrect. So, are companies actually secure from people walking out the office with it? I do know, certainly at Terminal 5 in the early days, you could slip a disk into your PC and take whatever you wanted. That very quickly disappeared, and the securities were put into place there. Crossrail in a similar way. You have to cut off the social media. You can have a machine in the corner that's not linked into the project database for people to use their social media, but you certainly don't want information disappearing up into the internet. So projects have to be secured, not just from an information point of view, but companies' financial information. Is it possible to hack that and take it out? So it's security, it's a big onion, and security at all levels to make sure that information, the businesses are secure, the finances are secure. And let's face it, one of the things here is an interesting one. When we hand over data, there is a requirement, I think, on one of the documents that says we need to know the name, address, telephone number, and email address of everybody that worked on the project. Under the data description, or data security point of view, can you actually hand that information over at the end of the day? The new PAS will tell us, or the new BS will tell us what we should and should not do. Okay, it's a very important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, you can certainly open up a can of worms there, isn't it? So, but it says, how is the
you're going to put the
data from individual projects?
Sorry, Andy, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. So how is the government centralising COBE data from individual projects?
That's an interesting term, centralised. Perhaps it's not, well, centralised within each of the departments. Let's say all the MOD stuff, I think I'm sure it will all be centralised eventually, because and all government information will be centralised at some time, or at least accessible. I think we have to be careful of the term centralised. If we have these amorphic systems, or the ability to, certainly in the government world, to exercise lots of bits of data in big data terms, to make decisions on the country's need, or to inform the economics of the country, or to inform spend requirements on infrastructure, etc., that information is going to be needed. And giving them the information on new buildings is just the start of this. They will start, and they've already started, collecting information on all of their other assets. If you have a look at PAS 1192, in there we've actually accommodated the ability to survey standing assets and to collect all the information on the standing assets to put into the asset information model. So it's coming from new projects, it's going to be collected from standing assets to build the portfolio, and I'm sure eventually in big data terms the government will be wanting to access all of its data in as simple a way as possible. And that's no different really from companies doing the same thing. Companies, I think, will centralize their projects data so that they can access, and certainly from a financial point of view, look at their cash flow systems and everything else. BIM is not just finishing with the 3D model, it's going to go into the back office, EPRs, EPPCs, etc. It will touch everything in the corporate business as well as the government business.
Okay, Mervyn, I think you've dealt with all the main questions there. So I think we should. Well, we've probably about time we wrap up this webinar. But thank you very much. I think it's very informative, and I hope everyone out there really enjoyed it. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to add, Mervyn?
No, it's a pleasure to do these things, particularly if we've got a lot of people accessing it and trying to find out what's going on. Strangely enough, I have to rush now because I've got another one in London at 5 o'clock. So there is a lot of interest out there, and there are lots of seminars going on. So anyway, thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Mervyn, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for joining in. And I'll be sending through the links so people can access the recording, and also I'll send through additional information with regard when the more webinars are organised. So thank you very much, and everyone have a good day. Cheers.
Thanks very much.